Hey everyone, it's me, Aridos.com Rashid. I'm your anthropologist and sociologist. When the villain ends up being right. In many stories, there is a model of storytelling. Not in all stories, but in many stories. I dare say in most stories throughout history. It goes like this. You have the population with some issues. The issues escalate. When it escalates, people look for someone to blame for the escalation. When they find the individual that they blame for escalation, now they want to act against the individual. But guess what? For them all to act against the individual will make them look bad. So now, out of the blue, someone shows up doing the dirty job for them. And that individual is considered the hero, and now everyone is left alone again. And people forget how they were all against uh, the bad guy. Because it's the hero that defeated the bad guy. And magically, everything is peaceful again. It is a common pattern of storytelling. Look at the myths from ancient Egypt, the Greek myths. Look at the Roman mythology. Even look at national mythologies today. For example, the national myth of the United States of America is that King George III of Great Britain and Ireland, and Ireland was a separate country back then from Great Britain. King George III, he was the bad guy. He was the villain that increased taxes over his British subjects in North America. And the British subjects in North America lacked representation. That's what the story is. And to go against this financial tyranny, they revolted militarily and established their own country called the United States, so-called built on biblical principles. If, even though that rebellion they did kind of goes against the values of the Bible, but anyway, it's another topic. So in this case, we have the founding fathers that are considered the heroes. You had the population that was innocent. They only had issues going on. And you had George Washington, the main hero, who came up and defeated the British and America's independence, tyranny over. It's a national myth because when you look at the actual history of what happened back then in the late 18th century, you realize that this national myth is simply not true. It's an explanation given to the public today to justify the current administration of the United States of America. But the story works. Why does the story of the American Revolution work? Even though when you research history, you realize that nothing of it is true. I don't think that there were no revolts going on in the world. I don't think that people didn't get fed up in the late 18th century. I don't think that the idea of independence was not in people's minds. I'm just saying that the national story they're telling American citizens is simply not true. And even in the story they're telling you, there are a lot of inconsistencies. But just you should understand the following. People out there in the world, for the most part, they simply don't care whether something is true or not. They only care whether it's true to them. Okay, let me say this one more time for it to get through to you. Most people in the world out there, they couldn't care less. They don't give a damn if something is true or not. The only thing they consider is if something is true to them. What I mean is, people often check whether some story benefits them or appears to benefit them. If a story doesn't appear to benefit them, they will discard it or put it aside like it doesn't exist. Now, this narcissistic tendency in our human species is why over and over again the masses are conned and deceived. That's why throughout history you have tyranny after tyranny. Why? Because most people in the world, the only thing on their mind is to escape. I'm not talking about a legitimate exit from a dangerous situation. If you're driving your car and you see that there's a tsunami wave coming, or you see that there's a hurricane coming on the road, or there's just a tornado on the road, you turn around and you flee with your car. Simple as that. If you are with your family on a safari and you see this uh, giant elephant rushing your way or a tiger coming at you, you run. I don't talk about accident, legitimate bad situations. I don't talk about that. I'm talking about people just wanting to escape, want to be on board, want to have ease continuously, never owning up the challenges of life and living life. That's what people in the world do. But of course, they don't want to admit this because there's nothing honorable or praiseworthy about this. Instead, the masses escape together in a cycle that's called society. So then the agreement becomes those that agree with this cycle of escapism, we honor them in the sense that we give them a lot of honors, we give them rewards, and those, at least we don't do it to everyone because we don't have the ability to do it to everyone, but some, the main people that we put out there, we reward them for getting along with the cycle. At the same time, people that question the cycle or even act against cycle, we punish them. We make life hard on them. And because we make life hard on those people, that becomes a deterrent for others not to question the cycle. That's how society works. And for society to work, you need a justification for the cycle. And that's where you end up with national myth. You also end up with stories about catching the bad guys. So, in short, society needs a villain that people can project all the failures onto. Society needs a villain that everyone is blaming for things not working well. Truth being told, if people truly took accountability and personal responsibility towards one another, there wouldn't be such thing as society. There wouldn't have, it just simply wouldn't work. Society is an unnatural construct because it's based on fear, and human beings are not built to operate in fear. Fear destroys your mind and your body. Simple as that. So, because society is an unnatural construct, it can only be maintained in an unnatural way by perpetuating fear. And what is the main fear of society? Or what's the main fear of the masses? The main, and I would say only fear of the masses is to be exposed. If the masses out there were all honorable, doing the will of Heavenly Father, looking after one another, what is there to expose? There's nothing to expose there because nothing is being hidden. And things that would be hidden for practical reasons. For example, people's security data, people's, people's medical record, or whatever. What I'm saying is, if a population is honorable, doing their part, there's nothing to be hidden. There's nothing to hide. Fact of the matter is, in the world, people are not doing the will of Heavenly Father. People are not owning up to life challenges, and people just want to be left alone, want to escape. So, because their attitudes are not honorable and they can't justify it, they now are looking for an excuse for why they are the way they are. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say you have two police stations in a city, and around 10,000 police officers. That's quite a lot for two police stations. But let's say you have two police stations, you have 10,000 police officers. In a population of, let's say, 2 million people. That's not a lot. But okay, you have 10,000 police officers, well trained and armed. But regularly, you hear about, people going missing. You hear about people being sex trafficked. You hear about children being groomed, all of that. The question becomes, what are those 10,000 police officers doing throughout the day? Of course, there are going to be police officers handling traffic instead of giving tickets in traffic. You're going to have police officers who are there to, you know, go when there's domestic violence going on. There are different tasks happening. But if you have so many police officers in a city or an area with 2 million people, and the main grievous crimes continue, the obvious question is, why is the main crime continuing? Because people are not dealing with it. That's the only explanation. But hey, if you have to admit they're not dealing with the main crime or the main crimes that are happening, you also have to admit that people are neglectful. It means people are okay with some of their own people being victimized. And it's not a comfortable thought to live with. So people come with all types of um, people make up a mythology to kind of justify the public's neglect. They will say things like, well, the Liberal Party, they make a bad policy. Or they will say, oh, there's a cabal, a sick society running our country. That's why we have so many sellouts. They'll come up with all types of conspiracy theories. They'll come up with all types of um, religious, fanatic explanations as to why the crime remains high in the country, even though you have a capable police force there. Because the simple answer that people just don't care enough about their own lives and the lives of those around them is an explanation that is too hard for a lot of people to accept. So it's easier to have a villain or villains to fight off than to admit, you know what, it's not the villain or those villains that's the actual problem. It's the population around us. Because you can put a villain or villains, you can put a villain in prison, or you can shoot a villain, kill a villain, and claim victory. But how are you going to do with thousands, even 10,000 of people who are neglectful? What are you going to do about that? Even if you were able to build giant prisons, who's going to put all those people in prison? Who's going to maintain all those prisons? And if you keep putting people in prison, who's going to be behind to keep the community going? Because everyone you put in prison is an individual less active in the community. If you take away a big portion from the people in the community, can the community still function? No, it cannot. Are you going to shoot down all those people? Then you end up committing genocide. I mean, what are you going to do with the masses that are neglectful? That's something people in the world don't want to think about. So people in the world, they opt for the villain narrative. That there's a villain we need to fight. We are the good guys. We are the victims over here. And we need to um, take out the bad guy. And don't get me wrong, taking out the bad guys is a strong motivation. People follow, people will voluntarily join the police force, join the military. People voluntarily will join political parties. I mean, catching the bad guys or defeating the bad guys, it motivates people. But guess what? Any type of victory obtained with the motivation of catching the bad guys will be a short lived victory, which in the long run will amount to nothing. On the short term, you may have some success. For example, you let's say you arrest a lot of criminals involved in sex trafficking. And because of that, sex trafficking has collapsed in the area. That's good. However, the victims of sex trafficking need to be need to go in rehab because they need to be uh, they need to go through healing and recovery to go back to the community. The issue with that is how do those human trafficking victims end up being human trafficked to begin with? That shows you that there was neglect from the community around them. And how come the community was so silent about them being trafficked? So those human trafficking victims, they see the full truth for what it is, that they've been neglected and thrown away by their own communities. Their own communities look the other way when things were happening to them. Do you think those people are willing to go back to the same community that made bad things happen to them? Likely not. On the other hand, will that same community be willing to admit that they were in on it, and will they commit themselves to be better, safer people, or is that likely to happen? No, it's not. So yes, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to remove all the human traffickers from the streets and imprison them. I'm not saying that itself is a bad thing, but you can't seriously think that doing that is going to solve the whole problem. Because the problem is a result of the public's neglectful attitude. So as long as the public is neglectful, you will continue to have similar problems. Simple as that. But a lot of people don't want to admit this, they want to hear this. So they opt for catching the bad guys. Catching the bad guys. And let me tell you, what if the villain or the bad guy ends up being the one telling the truth? The thing is, even even if the bad guy or the villain actually is guilty and is to blame, they by themselves could not have made the whole population go astray. Yes, people with leverage can bring corruption to a population. They can have a bad influence on the population, absolutely. However, at some point, you have to say, okay, this guy, whether he's a politician or a cartel member, or maybe he's just a cult leader. Or, anyway, this guy is bad news. This guy is tricking the masses. But how come the masses are tricked over and over again and nobody admits something's wrong here? And if they do admit something's wrong, how come we don't do something about the thing that's wrong? At some point, you have to conclude the masses are getting along with it. The masses decide to be part of it. Look, I analyzed Batman and the Joker before, and I explained in those videos, you can watch them on my channel. I've explained how Batman is really the bad guy, who's really the narcissist enabling the public's wrongdoing, and it's the Joker who's actually calling out the public and doing something about this. I've explained it. Now, I'm not here to do a movie analysis because I would be here for hours on this video. I'm just telling you, even in modern day movies, when you analyze those movies, the movies show you the reality of life out here. In some movies, the villain ends up being right after all. Look, I'm not saying that everyone out there who's labeled a villain is innocent. I'm not going that far. Some people are objectively wrong and doing wrong. Some people are objectively bad news. That's true. However, there are times even people who are bad news can mention things that are true. It doesn't mean they're operating in the truth. It doesn't mean they love the truth and they want to repent to be better people. But they can see the facts for what they are. Often they see the facts far clearer than people who are fighting them. A lot of people out there who are out there to catch the bad guys, they operate in blind faith. They operate in blind trust. It is blind trust towards the authorities. And later, when the authorities are exposed, say, well, I was just doing my job. I was just following orders. Or they have blind trust towards some cult member or some cult leader. Or they have some blind trust in some type of philosophy, for example, being stoic or free will or this whole teaching of boundaries, all that. People that are all about catching the bad guys, most of the time, not also most of the time, they're blind leading the blind. They don't sit down, slow down, calm down, and clearly think about what they're doing. They're so obsessed with catching the bad guys that in the process, often they become the bad guys that are perpetrating the bad situation. Let's get through to you. Worldlings don't care about what's true or not true because they don't even care about solutions really that will work in the long run. The main thing on their mind is to escape and to be unbothered. So anything that disrupts that ease, and to them is a villain, to them is an enemy. Even if whatever disrupts that ease is actually there to rescue them. If people, let's say you have someone who's an alcoholic, the alcoholic is destroying himself or herself. I'm using another example now. The alcoholic is destroying himself. Anyone that disrupts him from getting his next drink is actually saving his life. But will the alcoholic perceive it that way? No, they'll perceive the one hindering him to get the next drink as someone messing around with his quote-unquote private life or someone that's hindering him from having fun or whatever. A drug dealer relies on exploiting drug addicts. The thing is, he relies on people being drug addicts for him to make money. Do you think a drug dealer is going to be happy with drug addicts getting therapy and improving? No, he will not. Even though therapists and people giving therapy to drug addicts to help them out, it's an objectively good thing. But to the drug dealer, the people doing what's good and right is seen as the villain, as the bad guys. I want you to consider the following. Could it be that I'm not saying if this does not apply to you, it does not apply to you. Okay? But if it does apply, I want you to pay attention. Could it be that you've been tricked by the people around you to fight off people who have nothing to do with the damage you're going through? Could it be that the society you're in has brainwashed you to look down or to hate certain other people just that you want to look around and call them out for how they're treating you? Abusive parents, for example, and this is something that I saw happening. Abusive parents would often say things like, think about the children in Africa. They have nothing almost, but you guys are complaining here. You see this in movies. You sometimes you see it in commercials. You see people talking about this. The thing is, it's not actually true that children by default in the continent of Africa have nothing. That's not true. It's just propaganda. Any grown individual can see that. Of course, children cannot. Say that to a grown individual, you can think, what are you talking about? Even if it's true that children on the continent of Africa in general don't have anything, they're quite poor, even if that would be true, that does not justify you mistreating your own children. Just because your children have food on the table and a lot of children in Africa don't, doesn't mean they have to be happy with you being an ass or a bitch towards them. In a similar way, I'm telling you, could it be that the society you're in has lied to you and has tricked you into hating and blaming the wrong people so that you wouldn't call them out for how wrong they're treating you? I want you to think about that because a lot of people are finding out the hard way that the so-called villains that they were resisting and they wanted not to do it were right all along. There are only two options. Either you admit uh, the public crime against you and you realize that the only one that can keep you safe and guarantee you security and life is Heavenly Father, and you serve the Heavenly Father as you should be doing anyway, or you join society in their escapism and now you become the perpetrator of the same thing they were doing to you. So there's only two outcomes possible. Unfortunately, a lot of people choose the latter to join society in the wrongdoing. But what about you? What will you do? What the public is doing, you can't do anything about it. You can influence people out there, but you can't make them be better. Let's focus about something you can do something about. You. What will you do? Well, that's it for now. Keep on agreeing with Christ and be at peace.